Hi, my name is Josh Moran, and welcome to the Financial Aid System of Tennessee. This is the first video for DEG updates effective with the academic year 25-26. In this video, we're just going to cover some of the new concepts for DEG. We're going to do multiple shorter videos covering specific topics, instead of doing just one longer video going over the program as a whole. We're hoping this will make them easier to digest and also easier for us to make. But before we begin, let me run through a couple of things first. In this video and later DEG videos, you're going to hear me refer to TCAT and non-TCAT DEG a lot. Essentially, DEG operates as two different aid programs in FAST that happens to share an aid application. Those differences all depend on if the school is a TCAT or not a TCAT. So you're going to hear me say same or like institution type or TCAT or non-TCAT, and those differences are what I'm referring to when I'm saying that. So just to give an example, a non-TCAT loss due to GPA or max assistance only impacts eligibility at other TCATs. Those loss reasons only apply to institutions of the same types or non-TCATs in this case. The next housekeeping item is that DEG batch processing is included in these updates, but we'll cover them in their own separate videos specifically talking about batch processing. But I figured that was worth mentioning starting off here. Okay. So first, let's talk about why we're making these changes and what issues these changes are meant to address. So first, we're making these updates to address additional work required when paying, requesting, or exchanging funds for DEG coursework from multiple schools in the same term. So schools hosting the coursework will now certify their own payments, and TSAC will send payment directly to those schools. The next issue we're addressing is determining the DEG GPA in a timely manner when the student attends multiple institutions. So I think that there's a chance that some of you watching this video now are dealing with at least one student. You're waiting on transcripts so you can see if you can post the award for the next semester before the fees are due. So these changes remove requiring those transcripts be traded back and forth between colleges, and most of the time they're calculating a separate DEG GPA as well. So FAST will handle that for you, hopefully make it a lot easier. You may still need those transcripts for other reasons, but with these updates, schools will now submit information to FAST to calculate a DEG GPA, so that will take the pressure off to get that transcript, have it evaluated in time for you to make awards for the next terms. So we also needed to make some updates to separate DEG out as a program for coursework taking at a TCAT versus coursework taking at a non-TCAT. And you may not have noticed this in the past a lot unless you had a lot of students who took both TCAT and non-TCAT coursework, but the maximum assistance limits and GPA loss reasons have been split out from each other. So a student who's exhausted DEG at a TCAT should still have non-TCAT eligibility left inside of FAST, and vice versa also applies. So loss reasons are now specific to the institution type where they were received, and FAST does handle that for you. So what are these changes not meant to address? So these changes are not meant to address complications when determining how much you can award a student who is attending two institutions of the same type in the same term. So that would be 2 or more TCATs, 2 or more non-TCATs. So if you have a student that's attending another school of the same type, you'll still have to have some type of method for coordinating awards that term. But I want to remind you that you have to do that now before those. So DEG is still going to require that you coordinate awards uh, with other similar institution types. So let's also talk about how these changes can impact your local processes. You do have the added complication from multiple institutions on the application now, but this also gives you the opportunity to get ahead of what's traditionally been your DEG consortium students. So before these changes, your students were already attending multiple institutions the same term, right? Uh, we all had at least probably one of those students at your school sooner or later. But what we're adding now is just a method to identify them. And this may not have been a major concern for schools that only see these students in rare occasions, but we know that a lot of these schools have hundreds of these students each semester. And so now you can streamline the process for these students. And you can even specialize your communications with them based on which schools they indicated they'll attend. And we'll demonstrate how to do that in a future video, but I wanted to mention that now. That student can list multiple schools on the application. You'll have reports to identify which students and which schools and where to see you fall in that order on the application. So you'll have methods for doing that. So that brings up the possibility of streamlining your processes specifically for your students who are attending any school or just to get some basic information about any other consortium paperwork that may be required. You can send those communications to those students specifically and hopefully make the process a little bit easier for everyone involved. I also wanted to make a note about the number of schools the student can list on the application in case it comes up for you. So we allow the student to indicate up to 3 schools on the application, hoping that it would cover most situations. And it does look like that would be the case. We did look at data from schools who certify coursework from multiple institutions. In the vast majority of situations, it's 2 schools, very lesser extent, the student may do 3 schools. I think we only had 1 or 2 students who had more than that going back for the last few years. But we did, so we do allow 3 schools on the student to submit 3 schools on the application, but a TSAC employee can add a 4th and 5th school on there. So if you do run across that scenario, student is actually attending a 4th or 5th school that semester, you can contact someone at Jana or at TSAC like Jana and get them to add those additional schools. But we're hoping that you don't really have to use that 4th and 5th position, but it is there in case you need it. Next, certification. So we've changed certification now to allow multiple schools to certify in the same semester. So this is going to change your processes. You'll no longer certify DEG for coursework taken at other schools. Each school certifies DEG for coursework taken at their institution, and then payment is sent from TSAC to the school that certified that coursework. And so we do this by creating multiple payment records per term. So, you know, on the old DEG page, you would have seen Josh Moran, fall term, ready to certify, spring term, ready to certify, summer, ready to certify. Generally speaking, the institutions would have matched on all 3 records. You may have had multiple institutions if the student transferred in the past. But now, if the student specifies 2 schools on their application, you're going to see 2 fall ready to certify, 1 for each institution they listed, and the same is going to apply for every school on there. And again, we'll cover this more when we go over the new DEG scholarship page, and we'll demonstrate how those appear. But, so we have the multiple school records per term. We do require that the schools certify in order listed on the application. So, but it's important to remember that order is specific to the institution type. Everything DEG specific to TCAT or non-TCAT, right? So there's an order on the application. The order is relatively simple as long as you remember these two rules. So if you have a student who's listed two schools of the same type, say two non-TCATs on the application, the first non-TCAT would need to certify payment for a term before the second non-TCAT could certify payment. The same would happen if it was two TCATs instead. The second rule to remember is if it's two schools of a different institution type, so one TCAT and one non-TCAT, then both schools may certify at the same time. Remember the order, there are two orders specific to the institution type and one, in this case, one TCAT, one non-TCAT. So both schools are the first school of their institution type. So they can both certify as soon as certification opens. And I know it can get complicated, but let's do some examples to talk through that. So in this scenario, the student lists Nashville State first on the application and Ball State second. So in this case, Nashville State has to certify that term before Ball State is allowed to certify. Okay. If instead of that, the student lists Nashville State first and TCAT Nashville second, then both schools may certify for that term as soon as certification opens, because in this situation, Nashville State is the first non-TCAT listed on the application, and TCAT Nashville is the first TCAT listed on the application, right? So let's make it even more complicated. So let's say instead the student lists Nashville State first, Ball State second, and TCAT Nashville third. In this scenario, Nashville State has to certify that term before Ball State is allowed to certify. Right? Nashville State's the first non-TCAT, Ball State's the second non-TCAT. But in this situation where the students also listed TCAT Nashville on their application, TCAT Nashville can certify as soon as certification opens for that term because they are the first non-TCAT listed on the application. I know it can be a little bit complicated. Just remember, so when the student lists two or more schools of the same type, they have to be certified in order listed on the application. However, if it's two different school types, TCAT and non-TCAT, then each school can certify as soon as certification opens that semester. But just remember that. Hopefully we'll get you through most situations, but if you have questions about them, send them our way. Next, you no longer have to calculate the DEG GPA outside of the FAST system. Instead, you're going to submit information after grades are completed so that FAST will calculate continued eligibility as far as the GPA is concerned for you. So you're going to do this by submitting quality points and quality hours to the FAST system. FAST will calculate a GPA and then update eligibility for that institution type accordingly. And we have created multiple ways for you to enter this data. We know we're asking you to do extra work at the end of the term. We wanted to try to make it as simple as possible. We'll demonstrate how you can do that once we get to the end of term submission video, but it's relatively simple, but you do have a few different options, 2 manual and 1 batch method for submitting GPA inside of FAST. But again, we'll cover that in the DEG video, or DEG GPA video. We have these changes. Schools can submit requests for their own coursework. You have GPA submission, should make that part easier, but where's the catch, right? where might you have issues with these updates? And first, we'll go over with waiting for schools of the like type to certify their awards. So one of the consequences of allowing all schools to certify their own coursework is now having to require that all schools certify a prior term before the next term is certified. So this is the one group I don't have to explain it because of that DEG payment schedule. It can get, it can throw a lot of uncertainty in the process if we don't require some type of order in there. So you're going to have to wait if you're the second, third, or later school in the listed on the application of that same type. You have to wait for your, if you're a TCAT, you have to wait for any TCATs listed on the application before you to certify first, and the same would apply if you're a non-TCAT and had other non-TCATs listed on the application before you. Next, the second place where you might see some issues with these updates is waiting for schools to submit their GPAs. So like certifying prior terms. Sooner or later, you're going to run into a situation with waiting for quality points and quality hours for a prior term from another school that's impacting your ability to certify payment for a current term. But like I said, it's a trade-off. If FAST is managing the GPA, we had to put a check in place to see if that GPA covers all terms needed to calculate that term's DEG eligibility. So you cannot certify payment for a term if there's still outstanding grade information from a prior term from a school of the like type as yours. But if it's a different type than yours, then it won't impact your payment. So I want all of y'all to just keep it in mind this fall. If you run into one of these situations, you just got to think, well, at least I don't have to calculate a DEG GPA or ask my business office to cut a bunch of checks. So sooner or later, you're going to run into one of those two situations, but hopefully just keep it in mind. It's all a trade-off for the updates that we're being able to make here. Next in there, doesn't really impact your current processes because this is an issue now, but how much to award while being the second or later school of the like type, right? Like I said, we're not creating students attending multiple institutions. That happened before this update. But when the student's attending two TCATs or two non-TCATs, how much money can the second TCAT or the second non-TCAT award, right? We both know that this institution of the same type, if they certify before you, can have a big impact on what you might certify, especially for the non-TCATs. And when you have those, you get into those course amounts for 6 through 10, they can have a big impact on what you can pay. So this existed before these updates. They exist after these updates, but there's still always going to require or be required some type of coordination between the two schools when they're the same institution type. But otherwise, if it's one TCAT, one non-TCAT, those have parted ways. The awards made at one won't impact the other. They have their own separate limits and payment schedules, but it's just when you have that two institutions of the same type. We'll happily take ideas from that, but especially when you get to courses 1 through 5, 6 through 10, we just have not figured out a way to address that yet. The last thing that I'll mention in here, where you're likely, well, sooner or later you'll likely see an issue, is what I'm calling adjustments disorder. And again, this is currently an issue for both school types. Bigger deal with the non-TCATs for reasons I said for the different course types. But what I mean by adjustments disorder is where you have two schools of the same type and one of the schools makes an adjustment which either allows for additional funds or additional courses to be certified by the second school. For example, let's say we have a student who listed Nashville State first, Fall State second. Nashville certifies coursework for courses 1 through 3. Fall State pays for courses 4 through 6 for the same semester. If Nashville State refunds money for 2 courses, then Vol State likely needs to increase their payment for at least one of their courses on there. We'll have a report to help identify that, but it's a little bit of a tricky situation. It could have come up before in the past with just prior terms, across each other, but I think it's likely we're going to have this pop up more often now just because we have more schools paying in a single term. So, but that's it for this video. Kept it around 21 minutes on there. The most likely next video will cover the application reports and differentiating between students where you're the primary institution or potentially the second and third institution listed on their application. But thank you and hope you have a very good day.